Action Aid some work, debt review, looking at the tax incentives in Ghana, the tax incentives regime in Ghana, and looking at opportunities in that area if we review our regime. And we've put this report together and we want to share with you, CSO members and our media partners. And that is why we are meeting in this room today. We know we have people from different backgrounds, some in education, because the focus of this particular work is looking at how we can take advantage of the tax system to improve education financing in Ghana, and particularly the pre-tertiary level. Okay, to have this program run successfully, we have our chairperson. I would like to introduce her briefly. Our chairperson is a member of the SDG platform on education. And as we know, this program is about looking at how we can raise or mobilize domestic or local resources to finance education, because we also believe that we need to invest more in education to get the quality we deserve. And to steer this affairs is Mrs. Joyce Lanyon. Mrs. Lanyon is the Executive Director of the ICDP in Ghana. She has been part of the SDG platform for many years. She is the co-convener of SDG platform on education. And I also know that she is very passionate about girls' education and gender equality when it comes to education. So Mrs. Joyce Lanyon, you are welcome, and this is the floor for you to stay there. Thank you.
I want to first of all salute the country director who is here with us, Action Aid Ghana. I want to also salute the members of staff for the opportunity, and then I want to welcome you all for this very important assignment. You all agree with me that one of the main ingredients to our development process in every nation is revenue mobilization. Ghana and other developing nations in general are battling with several challenges in generating enough revenue to finance their development programs, especially within the education sector, of which is the reason we are here. This loss of revenue hinders government's capacity to provide social services to all the poor. Taxation, which is one of the sources government mobilizes revenue to address issues affecting the poor and the society, also have effect on our educational system. And so I'm very delighted that research has been done, and we are coming out to learn and share, and the recommendations that will be coming out will be used as a way forward. On my own behalf and on behalf of Action Aid, I want to welcome you all, and I accept willingly and heartedly accept the position as the third chairperson for this occasion. Thank you. The next on the agenda is to welcome our country director, Mr. Smaya Abdul Rahman, the country director for Action Aid Ghana, to give us the welcome address and then the purpose for this meeting. Thank you.
Madam Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the Tax Coalition, friends from civil society, fraternity, colleagues from Action Aid, our good friends and partners from the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. On behalf of Action Aid, I would like to especially welcome you to today's event. Education is the foundation for social equity and development. The statement goes beyond the ability of education to equip people with the knowledge and skills needed to fully develop their potential in order to participate in socio-economic development. Education gives people the avenue to escape the intergenerational cycle of poverty. It levels the playing field for children from all walks of life. This is why public investment in education is a crucial thing to consider. Education is a basic right as captured by the 1990 Constitution under Article 25, thus indicating that basic education shall be free, compulsory, and available to all. The government of Ghana is mandated by this to provide free access to quality basic education. This is why, as an organization, we applaud the free senior high school policy because it will provide opportunity for all. However, the right is not fully enjoyed by all because of the challenges associated with resources leading to inadequate financing. This and many other challenges are the reasons we have gathered here today to discuss how to deal with the challenge by making proposals through the report. The report follows a series of research conducted by Action Aid focusing on how to leverage domestic taxation for sustainable financing of the education sector, how progressive taxation can increase government spending on public basic schools, and reverse education privatization now, and what tax incentives can do for basic education in Ghana. The cost of education financing is a national issue that requires attention of government's expenditure allocation. The government's expenditure allocation to the education sector falls shy of the Global Partnership for Education target of 20%. Considering the fact that Ghana lost about $900 million to tax incentives through parliamentary tax waivers, and the fact that 20% of that amount would have provided more school infrastructure to people, raises a crucial point that should put things in perspective for all of us at this meeting. I would like to end here with a call to the government to revise the tax incentives, the tax strategies regime, and strengthen the tax system so as to increase domestic revenues for the country's development, including investment in education. I look forward to fruitful discussion today, and I sincerely hope that this report becomes a critical advocacy tool to engage children in Ghana, to ensure children in Ghana enjoy their right to free compulsory basic education. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simala. We are grateful for the insights. That's the reason why we are here. So the outcomes will really give us the real facts on the ground so that we'll be able to take it up and work with it. Our next activity on the program is the introduction of the key speakers for this forum. And the first speaker we have will be a presentation. She will only be here in person, but we'll do her presentation for you to see exactly what it is that she's telling us. And she will be in the person of Maria Ben Balsera. So a presentation will be done on her behalf, so we really understand. And she's going to talk about the importance of tax and education financing. And she is the research and advocacy coordinator for Action Aid International.
First of all, I would like to apologize for not being able to be with you. I would have loved to be with you. My name is Maria Rambalsena, and I'm the research and advocacy coordinator for the Tax Privatization and Right Education Project. It's a multi-country project in Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. And I'm going to share the screen with you. I hope you can see it. And this is just a very brief presentation because I guess my colleagues will be able to explain a little bit more of the importance of tax and education financing. So what we're seeing now with COVID is that that there is a chronic underfunding. Before COVID, there was already a chronic underfunding of education. The education budget in most of the low-income countries weren't reaching the 20% benchmark, the minimum benchmark of the national budget that should be going to education. And we saw that there were big disparities in education spending in terms of low income, middle income, high income countries, and there were still wide disparities within the country as well, and depending on which, between like preschool, primary, secondary, and tertiary education, as well as vocational. We also have seen that there is a growing teaching gap, and the financing gap system was estimated to be 1.8 trillion per year to be able to reach the SDG 4, and this was the estimation done by the Education Commission. And as you can see, you can see in the graph, most of this funding, 97% should be coming from domestic resource mobilization, so should be coming from within the country by taxing corporates, etc. properly, and only 3% should be coming from aid or loans. However, most of the attention has been on this 3%. And we also see that the servicing should not be more than 12%, because otherwise this really reduces the country's ability to finance education and other public services. Now what we see is that with COVID-19, everything has been exacerbated. So the consequences of COVID have been that the revenues of the government revenues have been falling because the GDP has been falling. And we also see that health and safety nets have been prioritized over education, at least in the short term. We see that the levels of debt have been increasing, but also the levels of poverty. And we see that there are budget cuts and regression, when in reality what we need is extra support. We need more investment to make schools safe. We need more investment to make sure we reach the growing number of disadvantaged students who don't have access to online lessons because they don't have electricity, they don't have equipment, they don't have the internet. And that this remote learning is actually education. This is, I'm going to go to the graph, the restore time. So what we propose is to focus on the 4 S's of education: the share, the size, the sensitivity, and the scrutiny of the budget, which is the share is the proportion of the national budget of the GDP that is spent on education, and this should be 20% of the national budget or 4 to 6% of the GDP, and these are the minimums. Okay, and we talk about the size of the budget, which is how it has to do with the proportion of tax to GDP, etc. It also needs to be increased, particularly in Ghana. We talk about the sensitivity of the allocation that has to be done with an equity criterion. We also talk about the scrutiny and the importance to ensure that the money arrives in practice, that is properly allocated. It's very important to train people in budget tracking so they can monitor where everything is going. So we're talking about the shared budget. As I said, the benchmark is 20% as the minimum. It's important we can compare to how much the government spend is actually allocated for the military or their services as well. But particularly in Ghana, it's very important how much is going into debt preparedness services, because the moment when I checked, Ghana was paying 59% of the GDP was being used for debt preparedness services, which really constrained the government to be able to invest in education and other services. Also, when Ghana has been surpassing this 20% benchmark, we have seen that in recent years there have been a retrogression. It's going below this 20%, and the government is not really explaining why. So this can be seen as a violation of human rights because the burden of the proof lies with the state. And what we see when governments are taking loans and the support from the IMF or from the World Bank is that there is a recommendation for fiscal consolidation, which means austerity, and it's about the public sector wage bill containment. And this has a massive impact on the number of teachers that can be recruited. So what we see actually is that the schools are basically like falling into disrepair, not being fit for purpose, and it's actually the people who have to pay the money, right? They have to pay development fees, they have to pay PTAs, etc. And this is because education is not properly funded. Okay, and this cartoon represents like, oh, like normally the Minister of Finance is like, well, we don't have enough money for education. And the Ministry of Education will say, we don't have enough money to give to these schools and to these places. And why is it? Well, part of it, a big part of it is because there is a lot of revenue being foregone, particularly on tax incentives and illicit financial flows. So both tax evasion and tax avoidance. And this really needs to be tackled if we are serious about education and reaching the SDG 4. So the important thing is about the size of the budget, because if we are going to be this 20% of the budget, if it is a very small pie, it's still going to be a very small portion. So what we need to do is to increase this pie. So the UN recommends a tax to GDP ratio of 20%, but at the moment when I last checked, Ghana was only 13%, which is way below what it should be. And why is that? Well, we have commissioned several studies. It started to do with not being able to tax the extractive sector properly. But I'm going to mention about the tax incentives, because this is a new estimate that we have. And in Ghana is supposed to be losing, and this is a very conservative estimate, $1.34 billion per year. Okay, every year, and as I said, it's a conservative estimate. And so we just said 20% of this, what could this money pay for? So this could pay for school places for all the children left out of primary school and all the adolescents still left out of lower secondary school 1 year. So the year could pay for that. And, not all, but and, the salary of 10,000 newly qualified teachers, extra teachers, 10,000 extra newly qualified teachers, plus it could pay as well for free school meals for 1 million children every year. So this is a really good tool for you to advocate for these changes, to go to the government and say you really need to revise all these incentives, because actually this is not really bringing money into the economy. This is the way that foreign investment is really being made, and we are losing a lot of revenue because of them. And as a side effect, part of this problem of the underfunding of education can be seen in the growing privatization of education. So this is coming in two prongs, because in a way, families, those who can afford it, are trying to look for better alternatives for their children and are spending vast sums of money on private education. But also the government is in a way abdicating its responsibility, its duty to provide free public education of good quality. And as we can see in this graph, the school enrollment in primary private school has been increasing nearly exponentially, reaching the level of like 28%. And this is huge, and there are areas such as Accra where there are much more private schools than public schools. And what we see is that this number of private schools keep increasing, because the government, in a way, is like leaving that space, even encouraging the private sector to keep offering education, and therefore abdicating its responsibility to provide this education. So, as I said, the answer to how to counteract privatization of education that we know leads to segregation, stratification, only allowing those stratification in terms of you get the quality of education that you can afford. And this has serious effects on the country as a whole, and I'm going to dwell on it. But it's not only about increasing the share of the education budget and the size of it by taxing properly, like through progressive taxation, but also the sensitivity, as I said, making sure that we understand with equity criterion and the scrutiny, making sure that the money goes where it should go, that the budget is being done in a transparent way with proper representation, proper participation from all the stakeholders. And it's very, very important, as I said, to train people at local level so they can monitor where the money is going. So just to say again, thank you very much for inviting me to talk, and I'm very sorry I cannot be there. Best of luck. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Madam Maria. I think we'll have opportunity to ask questions. So, in order not to waste too much time, we'll move to the next speaker, who is Bernard Nava.
What tax incentives can do for basic education in Ghana, the trend of tax incentives, and missed opportunities. So I'll give a brief background on some of the happenings in basic education sector and why it needs more government support. Then I'll look at the findings of the report and the possible sources of more funding for basic education in particular, especially through savings from tax incentives, if we can do that. Then I'll look at I'll conclude with some recommendations. So briefly, I think the country director gave us a very succinct importance of education, and we know that generally it is the most appropriate tool for leveling inequality or bringing anybody to a certain playing field. Education will help improve living standards for everybody, eradicate poverty, will help us to achieve our potential. Most of our unfortunate brothers and sisters who do not get education may be talented, but they may not be able to achieve their potential because they don't have the education. It also helps us to understand ourselves very well and also the world. It can lead to fulfillment in life in most cases. So why should some people be left out with all these good things about education? So for these reasons, we'll have to advocate for everybody to be able to get a share of education so that we can all enjoy some of these important things about education. So privatization of basic school, as Mariam said, is something that is happening. If we don't see it or we don't realize it, we are slowly getting deeper into it. So we realize that financing basic education is increasingly looking unattractive to our governments. Very unattractive to our governments. Of course, we are happy that they have looked at the secondary sector and provided free secondary education. But if you don't do well at a basic level, you will not enjoy that. So we think that basic education is very important. And the examples are that looking at the MIS data, the government's own data in 2018, says that we have more private schools in Greater Accra than public basic schools. It means that more and more government increasingly shifting away, where not providing the resources for public schools, and more private people are entering into that sector. Because if you don't have it, if you don't have public schools around your area, you have to find a way of providing your own education. So that is a kind of trend that is ongoing. So instead of private education supplementing public education, as we know, I think the initial idea of Nkrumah, when 1961 promulgated idea of private school, parents getting involved in education, I think, was to supplement government. But increasingly, it's now what? Taking over, which is not a good thing. It means that it's leaving so many people behind, if that's the way we are going. And also looking at between 2001 and 2015, we have to look at recent data that I'm sure the trend continues. Private schools have seen a higher annual increase in numbers compared to, well, I think I talked about this. An example, if you look at the rate of increase of private schools, it's about 9.6% compared to 1.2% for public basic schools. So as the population is increasing and we need more schools, government's rate of increase of basic schools is lower compared to private schools. So this trend means that gradually, before we realize, all basic schools will become privatized. And if you don't have the money, you can't afford it. And when it happens that way, what it means is that those who have the money tend to send their children to what? The private schools. And if they even have more, they'll send them to outside or whatever. And it's not just the fact that you have the opportunity to send your child to a better school or somewhere, but the fact that you are a decision maker and you tend to forget about where your children are not. And that's what is happening. Most of the basic schools are in a state of neglect because most of us who make decisions concerning education, we don't have our children there. So we don't see the real problem. So in terms of enrollment, we also saw that the same thing, enrollment in private schools are increasingly more than basic public schools. And it's a logical trend that is happening. And gross enrollment as well. If you look at the national average, as at 2018, between 2011 to 2018, it's 83.8%. That's the national gross average. But if you go to other district regions, it varies. And what it means is that we don't have all our children even at a basic level in school. And a lot of them are outside the school boundaries. And they are being left out of what is important in education. And looking at the trend as well, look at this trend between 2011 to 2016, there was a decline, a kind of downward decline from 2011 to 2016. From the highs, we were achieving, like Maria said, in terms of the expenditure of the as a percentage of government allocations, according to the Global Partnership for Education benchmark, 20%. And we're achieving higher than 20% in the 2010, 2011 thereabout. We're doing so well. And also because at that time we had the MPGs. So I was pushing a lot of people into that sector, so we're having a lot of interest in the area, funding other things. So we're doing so well. But gradually, as the MPGs were getting out of phase, we also saw a kind of declining trend. So by 2016, we're doing around 14% of government allocations. Then when we look at the recent data as well, in terms of percentage allocation for the education sector, looking at the benchmark, that's the 20% of the GPE benchmark, saying that we shall allocate about 20% of government allocation to education. This is what we got. 2006, 14%, 13%, 14%, 16%, so it is now leveling at that rate. So if you want to look at in monetary terms, the deficit in terms of allocation to education according to what we think will help, it's about 3 billion Ghana cedis in 2016, 4 billion, 4.8 billion in 2017 and so on. So the highest is around 5.8 billion in 2020. The 2021 is a projection. When you look at the budget, it provides projection. So it tells us that even going forward, we are not seeing anything that's going to show that we are. So we are staying at that level. And if we look at the current situation, and it's not too good, and we are not also seeing any upward adjustment, then it means that we are satisfied with what it is now. So funding for education as a whole is not seeing any improvement since 2016. So what can we do about that? As we said, it's all about money. And of course, we know there are a lot of competing needs in the country. But of course, some needs are also very important. And very important, and if we prioritize rural education, will also be one of the top needs. The resources, where can we get resources? And we think that tax revenues. Because consider all the borrowing, all the money that government makes, eventually it is tax revenue that pays for them. The consolidated fund, when the government goes out and takes 5 billion, it doesn't pay it out of anything other than the money we pay daily as taxes. Anytime our money falls into the consolidated funds, they give it out to those they have borrowed their money from. So they are happy to go and borrow a huge amount and they spend it. But how do they pay for it? They pay from our taxes, small. So eventually taxes underline everything. So but that's where we can get the money to fund education. So it is the surest way, as I said, that we can find the money to fund basic education. And why? Because taxes are the principal source of government revenue. I explained this. Second, because domestic resources, social taxes, are more sustainable source of financing than external conditional sources. So we do know that we get support from external sources, the World Bank, IMF, and bilateral sources. And when we depend more and more on that, it means that we may not be making progress. Each time government will talk about donor funding not coming or not being enough, so it has to cut down its expenditure. But eventually, we have to rely on ourselves, and which means that if we're able to fund our needs through our taxes, it is more sustainable, and we can project because it's coming from us. We know how much we are going to be able to make. But also, as was said earlier, it's a problem because, like Mara said, it's difficult to make, for a country like Ghana, the average is that we should be making closer to about 20% of GDP in terms of taxes. But for a very long time, we are around 30%, 15%. We are not able to cross that hurdle. But we can also see that this country has so much in terms of resources, in terms of jobs. People are working. We can see on our streets. But we are not able to cross that boundary of making tax revenue about 20% or 80% of GDP. The finance minister, every time they will come, they will tell we are going to expand the tax base, they will give us all sorts of promises, but we are still around the 13, 14. We are not able to make a headway. And when you look at it, why? It's because of the generous tax incentives that we give it, and that caps how much we can collect as a people, and also illicit financial flows. Those are illicit, and they get away from our country in various ways. If you look at, well, I don't want to mention other things, but let me just go. So you look at estimates from Tax Justice Network Africa for Ghana between 2011 to 2014, how much we lost averagely each year. So in 2011, we lost about $430 million. If you translate, that's about 20,000, 21,000 Ghana cedis, well, roughly. 2012, about 1.2 billion. Then the average, as I said, from 2011 to 2014 is around $693 million. That's about, at that time, it's about 1.4 billion Ghana cedis. I'm sure the rate, when you look at the current rate, it will be different. Yeah. So it means that we are losing so much that if we were able to at least save some, we will make some progress. Our tax to GDP ratio may increase from maybe 15 to 16 or 17. But if all these are going away, then we are not going to be able to do that. Now we also look at the World Bank Group study on Ghana between 2010 and 2014, and they estimated that Ghana annual tax incentive was about 5% of GDP. This report was done in 2017. And you know, the funny thing is that some of us, we do these researches, we try to find out, but you don't get the right data, the right sources. You know the problem about going to get the right data to do these things. But a while back, the IMF, anytime they come to evaluate our governments, they willingly give all the data because they're going to get money from those places, so they don't have an option than to give them. So sometimes we tend to believe some of those information. So when they say something, we know that it's our government that has given it to them to say. So sometimes, so they say we lost about 5%, and that's huge. If you look at the size of GDP today, that's close to about 20. If our GDP is around 200 billion, then that's about 20 billion there. That's huge, but that's an estimate. Then they said in that same report that in terms of all this, what is given away to Parliament is about 22.9%. So that's just a fraction. And with an Action Aid report in 2014, we also estimated that Ghana loses about 1.2 billion annually each year. So it tells us that definitely we are not in the negative concerning tax incentives. It's always in the positive. Anybody that says anything about it means there's something going out. But how can we save some? And how does this happen? It happens because we lower our tax rates. There are various ways that, you know, when the business people or whatever, they come to consult the finance people, the dealers that go on, they lower the rates for them. So you may not see it. Granting special waivers, like happening in Parliament, deferring losses for some companies. So there are all sorts of deals that eventually, when you want to collect or you realize that, oh, you've lost. But government tax incentives are not necessarily bad. When we talk about tax incentives, sometimes it appears as if we are totally against tax incentives. No, every country does it. Ghanaians, when the pandemic hits, yes, the government gives incentives to health, frontline health, whatever. I mean, there are some incentives that are good, so we are not totally against incentives. But when you are giving incentives, it should be for a reason. And one of the reasons is that you bring about technology transfer and jobs. So over the years, we have so many high-tech, very able companies, oil and gas, mining, they have come to this country. And by now, we should be doing it ourselves. Because we would have learned the technology, we have translated that kind of positive externalities into our work sector or in our own environment. It means that we are never learning anything. Are they teaching us that thing we are not learning, or we ourselves we are not willing? So we are not getting the benefits that we are supposed to get for giving them the incentives. And the jobs, well, I don't want to say we don't get the jobs, but sometimes when you look at the salaries and how much are being paid, it doesn't match what it is. And the data shows that we do not get these promises. And to look at it too, most companies do not really need the incentives. Incentives have a reason. And most of the case, why we in Africa or in poor countries give incentives, they'll say our governments are not stable. A government will get that one day and say they are seizing companies or they are abrogating contracts and there are fights here and there, we don't have stable environment. So we need to give them extra incentive to protect their investments. Those are the reasons they give us. And we don't have the right infrastructure for them to invest in our country. They have to, you know, if they need water, they have to procure the water at extra cost. The roads are not good, their tracks, everything will get damaged. One of those reasons are the reasons they give us. But if you look at Ghana today, can we say that over the last few years we are not stable? Can any Ghanaian think that a government can just get up and seize another person's property or companies or whatever? It's not, but they still make those reasons and we give them incentives for that. In terms of infrastructure, they will compare your infrastructure with maybe Burkina Faso and that sort of thing. It's not equal. So some of the incentives are not really necessary. They cannot be justified, but we still give them. And I'll give an example of how it happened. For instance, in 2018, it is known that Ireland is one of the largest source of foreign direct investment in Ghana. So it means that most of the companies that come to invest in Ghana, they come to Ireland. And we know Ireland, this problem, even the European Union, they have a problem with them. They think that there's so much money that has gone to that country that is lost to other countries. They negotiated their rates with Ghana. It was cut between, it was 50%, they cut it to 8%. That is the domestic rates for technical service fees. You know, there are all sorts of things that they look at when you are coming to invest. Then from 20% to 10%. So you look at this tax rate, you can cut more than half. So if you are going to make 10 million out of this thing, you end up making 5 million. But it may not appear to you readily until you see the details. And this is an example of what happened. They came and renegotiated their contract with our government. Our government agreed to them, whatever reason they did. So we look at what we gave our tax incentives from our parliamentary records. And these are hard figures. It's not like somebody is, you know. These are what Parliament granted out that we all saw. We are not estimating from what we know. To say that, government says that we do 10% of this. So we multiply by a certain figure and get an estimate. These are tabulation of real figures that we gave out. So in 2018, the tax incentive we gave was $500.9 billion. That would be about 20 billion if you want to convert. Then 2009, February 2020, we gave away $400.2 million of tax incentive. So in total between 2018 and 2020, the beginning of 2020, we gave tax incentive almost $1 billion. That's $901.1 million as tax incentive. So these are just parliamentary waivers. But if we want to look at the other aspects, you see how much we are losing. So by estimate, if we gave away almost $900 million, and we are saying that we should always allocate about 20% of all government budget to education. So by estimate, if we are looking at 20% of this figure, we are not taking all the figure, the rest, you know, for education, we are just safeguarding our education, let's say 20% of it. That will be about $180 million. And looking at various expenditure in the education sector, basic education that we will spend this money on, we are thinking that for expenditure for primary school child, that's the mean annual cost for people in, let's say, Gansa. We have some data on Gansa and Ghana West Municipality, how much is spent on them each year annually. That's about $189.6. And it could fund close to 950,000 children if this money was allocated for that. Then you look at the average annual teacher salary, about $2,303. And that will also fund potential about 78,000 teachers a year. So the alternatives or the things we have forgone, we have lost because of these incentives are the things that we will do with this. The average annual cost of feeding or giving a school child a meal is around $18.4. And that could potentially feed around 9 million children a year. So if you look at these figures, and this is just a fraction, what we can do with them and what we are losing for that, this is so much for the children. But in terms of government, or in terms of those who are making the policies, so they look at $180 million, it's peanuts, it's nothing to them. But on the ground, it can do so much. And why are we saying this? We are saying this because it's possible to save this amount. It's not so much of a huge amount. It's possible to save it. And when we save, you can see what it will do to a lot of children. And according to empirical reports, businesses do not actually need tax incentive. As talked about this, and there are evidence that could, that we could make. So this case is to say that there are reasons that, or there are ways that our government officials, parliamentarians, could make to save this money. Sometimes they just make decisions that you don't really understand. They have the bargaining power on their side that they could make to save us that money, but sometimes you don't know why they make those decisions. So it's not so difficult to save that amount of money. Now I want to give an example. In 2016, we knew that there was a particular case of a tax incentive that was to be given to Meridian Post Services. In one hand, what the company agreed, and they were going to give them as a tax incentive, was $982 million. And another side of the parliament thought that no, that is so much. So through the wrangling and getting people to know, they eventually pitched it down by $50 million. So if the company says that I cannot invest without 900, how come that they're able to go down to by $50 million? So it's possible. It's possible to negotiate better. If the other side of the house or public do not get involved, those $50 million would have been lost. So it's possible. Now we look at another case. In 2015, Ghana renegotiated some of its mining concessions with Goldfields Mining Company. And this was led by Professor Tilagba. And today, the man is not so happy about what has happened in that sector. He's just not so happy at all about what has happened in that sector. Because since some people have gone back behind what they have laid down to do something else. And the company comes out to tell you that, oh, we saved $33 million in 2015 tax year. And in 2016 tax year, we saved $26 million. This is the company saying what they have done because they have renegotiated a deal. But it's not like we couldn't have saved this if we stood our ground. Because the groundwork has been laid out, look, this is how we do it. But some people have gone behind and do this. And just one or two deals, look at how much you have saved, how much you have lost. And a lot of multiples of this are going on daily. People are entering into all sorts of deals, contracts in the name of our country, and we are losing so much. Now I want to read some of the deliberation in Parliament that shows that, yes, it's not that something cannot be done about it, but sometimes it's because we allow it to go. Now, it says that, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion for the House to adopt the report. Mr. Speaker, the request to approve $26.9 million as a tax waiver for a loan, which the government contracted in 2010 for the upgrading of 10 technical institutes and 5 polytechnics. Mr. Speaker, this number was increased to 13 technical institutes and 10 polytechnics or technical universities later. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the report and the attachment, it tells you that the list of items that we are to exempt from import duty and the rest are such that it appears that virtually everything is being imported. Virtually everything is being imported. In fact, if you go through, you will see items like stew, things that, and when they give you items that they will bring in, you have to give them tax waivers. But most of those things you can get them in good, you don't need tax waivers. It is also to be imported and exempted from import duty. Other items like washing bowls, curtains, pillows, and pillowcases are to be imported and exempted from tax. Mr. Speaker, sometimes when we are to approve facilities of this nature, it will be good for us to study to find out. Let us not give blanket tax exemption that every item should be exempted. If we know there are certain items that we can procure here, we can procure here, so it goes on and on. So this is the Honorable Abeji of Ketunov. He was making the case. Look, what we are proving, if we go through, we can beat down the price. But we are giving a blanket, and when you go to a parliamentary council, you see a lot of this dissenting view, but our parliament is always about the majority. When you are in the minority, just forget it. Just make your case and go away. So there are examples why. And also in the Ireland case, we know that in terms of Ireland, the government was advised against entering into tax treaty with Ghana. Because some of these officials realized that, look, they are coming to cheat us. They are coming to beat down our tax rates. The officials know, and they know it's not good practice. So they advised their governments not to do that. But they still came ahead to negotiate with our government, make the case, and we reduced the tax. The one I showed you earlier, from 15 to 8% and from 20 to 10%. They know, but they still came anyway, and they know we are ready to give, and we also give. So currently, as I speak, the Tax Justice Coalition, together with some international Action Aid Ireland, Christian Aid Ireland, they are reporting this case, or reporting the Ireland Ghana to the UN Human Rights for the Rights of the Child, to educate the case to see that how developed countries like Ireland are increasingly taking advantage of our system and beating down our tax system and affecting children in our country. So we are hoping to get a good ruling and to see whether it will catalyze some of our advocacy on tax incentives. So we also look at the data in terms of the tax waivers that was given and try to see how much or the percentage of each value that is given as tax incentives. So if you look at the left-hand side, we have water supply projects, about $48 million, rehabilitation and upgrading of equipment, $190 million, and so on. So the average value of all the investment that were given tax is around $1.3 billion. That's $1,311.78 million. And if you look at the average percentage or ratio of incentive that they gave out is around 19.6%. That's 0.16. When you look at it in percentage, it's 19.6, almost 20%. So any investment that comes into this country, it tells you that about 20% of that value is given out as tax incentive. That's quite huge. That's quite huge. So in terms of conclusion, the state have obligation to provide free and good quality education. Making some children to lose out on basic education whilst giving away tax incentive will constitute a violation of the right of the child. So the state have that right, and we also, children have the right to basic education. And if we are prioritizing giving away tax incentive, they're looking at the problems in our homes, then that's a violation of the right of the children that are losing out. Those children that are on the streets that are not able to go to school. We did a study in Ghana and realized about 15% about the people we interviewed, over 300 children, were not in school. And when you ask them why, they say they don't have the money or whatever with that. And sometimes the things we take granted, it's not so. You go to some homes, it's really very dire. Very dire. They just can't afford. They want to survive, not to go and sit in a classroom and their mind is somewhere. So they just roam around and don't attend school. So a little can do so much for some people. So it's possible to find the extra money through tax saving tax incentive. And as a community, as I said, education is a fulcrum of investment in people. Hence, we must prioritize education from the for extra budget funding. This statement. So we need to prioritize education because it's very important. Government must first improve domestic resource mobility by curbing tax leakages, i.e., tax incentive of illicit flows. Today we are talking about tax incentive, but illicit flow is also a huge area. And then allocating 20% of such savings to education following an equity criteria. So, and the FQ, that's the free compulsory basic education, has still not been achieved. because basic education is still a huge cost to most poor parents. Like I said, it's still a cost to most poor parents. The capitation grant of 9 cedis that is often given to a child is just nothing to write home about in terms of what it needs to supply to the children. But we make political capital out of it. It makes it look like so huge. Those who suffer it are not able to get a voice to come and save it. Those of us who have the voice to save it, most of the time we don't experience it. So there's a gap. There's a gap. Government must prioritize basic school funding as a key foundation for every child. And as campaigners, we must increase our advocacy for more attention on basic education, basic schools, possibly take the government on its legal obligation to the poor. So we must also step up the global and regional tax campaigns against race to the bottom on our taxes, like Ireland is doing to us. And it is getting worse to the detriment of education financing. We must hurry. So what is happening, if we move slowly, before we realize the next generation will not have what we have today. So thank you for your attention.
Once again, welcome you all here. Those who came in late, we started with a presentation from our country director. Let's give a brief of what we've been doing so far, and that will prepare you to probably pitch your questions appropriately and then get the necessary answers. We have our brother, he's already here. He's a champion to take over and speak to us about opportunities in the extractive sector for domestic resource mobilization. Mr. Louis Echampo, please let's give him a hand. Thank you very much.
It's been a privilege to be part of this process and sharing experiences from the practice. I would say that my presentation is a build-up on what the report has showcased and the facts that has been outlined already. So just giving some practical examples and some potential actions for civil society and citizens in general. Okay, so I keep it as discussion points. We will look at, yes, the opportunities as has been outlined mainly by the report, and then also with basic education in Ghana, what tax incentives, if you're able to block them or avoid them or reduce them, how it can impact on education. So basically, in broad sense, extractive sector, we are looking at the mining, we are looking at the oil, petroleum, we are looking at gas. And then there are other natural resources that are also classified within the extractive. Even sand winning, salt, and others are all part of the extractive that is classified within the country. We are looking at, we are saying that the opportunities thereof for us as a country is that it contributes to national revenue mobilization, which sometimes we also term as domestic revenue mobilization. Resources that are generated or mobilized in country, either at the national level or the local government level. It also increases domestic revenues, especially if we're able to stem the erosion of public financial resources. There is a need as opportunity to look again at our national tax laws and their architecture, our tax architecture in general, to be able to help sustain the fiscal and economic justice. This is critical in the sense that our tax reforms is still one of the most dynamic, system in the country, because almost every year there are some level of reviews. And sometimes some policies that we put in place will withdraw, some will go back to it again. And when the national budget and then economic statements are read every year, there are bits and pieces of tax-related issues that goes back to reform. It also has a great potential in alleviating the economic burdens of the poor and the vulnerable communities in which these extractive activities take place. This is one of the extracts directly from the report that is elaborating some facts. For the basic section, which is the preschool to the junior high school, the data shows that it receives, as a country, more than 40% of the total education sector allocation. That is budget analysis, looking at periodic or the annual budget, what allocations are being given to the education sector. And this is in reference to the 2018 and 2021 education sector medium-term expenditure framework. Now, if you look at these percentages, it looks good, okay? It looks good, but then it is still not adequate to be able to manage the current basic education system that is running. And this is a percentage that is allocated to the preschool, junior high school of the main budgetary allocation to the sector, to the education sector. So these are not to say the totals that the sector is receiving, but then the component that is going to the preschool and then the junior high school. And elaborating the point is to say that in spite of all these efforts that the government of Ghana is, going through undertaking, it's still struggling to meet the projected 20% allocation that is being spearheaded by the Global Partnership for Education Initiative. And then also, we are not too clear to what level Ghana will be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the Goal 4, which is focusing on education for all. Okay, so with this as the background, which has been shared generally in the report, we are looking at the tax incentives and what it can be done for the basic education in Ghana. And we are saying education financing, education policy reforms, the infrastructure development are three key areas that money that as a country we can retain from tax incentives, we can use it to strengthen these sectors of education. This is some little elaboration to also help us see some of the values that we are losing out of these incentives. And Bernard mentioned about the parliamentary waivers, and this is one key example looking at the total investment value of mining development or mining projects up to about $880 million. And then for this value, tax waivers granted were $259 million. If you look at the percentage or the quantum of money that the country is to have earned out of these mining development projects, we have given away $259 million, which has taken advantage by the multinational enterprises as tax incentives. This, for instance, is a direct, even before the project itself is executed, they have secured this. And one example is to say that whatever total value they have projected to have invested in the country on the extractive sector, and this is mining, one component of the extractive sector. The oil, the petroleum, the gas, and others are also different components that adds up to the values. So if mining alone, the concession that we are giving out is around $259 million. You can imagine the oil and gas sector as well, how much we are losing in these incentives that we grant even before projects are initiated. This is an advantage for the investor even to retain this component of cost. So this money may not even land in the shores of the country for its local economy to be enhanced, including education, infrastructure, and financing. There are other incentives. Investment recovery opportunities. For the mining sector, they are involved in these machinery and huge investment to note. So if we are talking about that $880 million as investment, we are also giving them additional opportunities to recover their investment. And that is to say, over a period that they will be investing or working in the country, they are going to enjoy extra opportunities. So as the money they pay out there, the profit they get or the revenue they generate, a component can be used or is permitted to be used to defray their investment cost. Most of these mining companies and multinational enterprises are not VAT eligible, value added taxation. So even when they take services, they use facilities and others that are VAT obliged, they can say, no, we as an institution, we are VAT exempt, so we will not pay the VAT. So calculate the VAT and take it off the product cost so that I will pay the actual cost of the product without the VAT. So we are also losing through this incentive. Exemption from customs import duties on plant and machinery. The big, if you have visited any of the mining and extractive sector, communities, you will see these big vehicles and infrastructure that they put up. If the oil and gas, the FPSOs and the others that they are using, these are all plants and machinery. If you go to the mining sector, the shafts that they are developing, the big excavators and the big vehicles that we see are part of the plant and machinery. And they have exemptions when they are importing these materials or plant and machinery into the country. One excavator, for instance, the last time I checked, is around 770,000 cedis in Ghana here. 770,000. You remember what we used to say? 7.7 billion. That is 7.7 billion for one excavator. Okay. And when they are importing this, if import duty was even, say, 10% or even 5%, that is a lot of money that have gone into government chest to be invested in education and other primary sectors. But these are exemptions that we give to the industry because they have dialogue or engaged government ahead of time, and they have applied and they have been granted these as waivers. The corporate tax that they are even supposed to pay, they are also able to negotiate and then reduce it. In most cases, in the extractive sector, they don't even pay. Currently, we have our corporate tax rate around 25%. And if you go to the extractive sector, the waivers that they have enjoyed, I think I cited one example of Anglo-Gold Ashanti, and the waiver they have is about $38 million, over $38 million as tax waiver. So that is exactly the corporate income tax that they would have paid within the project life of the Obuasi Mine Redevelopment Project. They have negotiated and waived it over a 25-year period. So they are not even going to pay. So in addition to they negotiating to reduce, sometimes they are able to even waive it completely. Retention of foreign exchange earnings. Critically, whatever goes out there, most of these extractive sector products, we don't add value to it in our country. If you look at petroleum products, it goes out there in raw form. If you look at gold, the same thing, it goes out there in raw form. Even timber and others are doing the same. So when they export the product or they sell out the product, they are supposed to bring back the returns into the economy. But our laws and our policies permit them to retain components of these in their foreign exchange earnings. And then they are guaranteed free transfer of dividends. The small that comes back into the country, they also have opportunities to transfer that back into their shareholding places, where some of them are even in tax savings and other things. So the tax component there, we lose it again. And then guaranteed against expropriation by the government for them in the contract, and these are some of the key things that are within contract that our leadership, our government, in most cases, do not do due diligence or will not have the time to look at it properly to negotiate as appropriate. But because most of the time, the electronic companies, they draft the contract before they bring it to our leadership for consideration and endorsement. Some of these things are there, and then they are securing themselves against nationalization and other expropriation. But then we as a country do not have enough indicators to gain the maximum best out of the project and engagement. This is also extracted directly from the report, which is elaborating some critical benefits to basic education that if we are able to retain most of these incentives that we give out, we will be able to honor and do it better. So this is an important component to say that government should strengthen its negotiating so that we are able to retain more, then we can do more for our country. If you look at FQ as Bernard indicated, the free senior high school as he indicated, and other promises that are being issued out. Where is the money to implement these? And then also to sustain it, and to expand it, and to ensure that citizens enjoy the best out of the lot. 950,000 plus potential number of extra primary school places will be provided in basic schools. Opportunities for children to go to school and to be well catered for. 32.1 million potential number of primary school textbooks could be available to schools. And these are examples of how the extractive sector funding or the revenue that would have generated out of the tax incentive that we grant can be used to strengthen the economy and then the educational sector. Please move on. Okay, so I have proposed some action points for our advocacy to say that knowing all this is not enough. We need to also increase our voice and strengthen our engagement with government to ensure that government would also negotiate as appropriate with the extractive sector institutions and the investors, the multinational enterprises. Because they are very, very strong and they can prepare. Before they will think of bringing this $880 million to invest in the country, they have also engaged experts, tax experts, legal experts, and others to assess the local economy and to assess the policies and the regulations and see where they can also act favorably. Because at the general instance, they are not thinking of that first. They are thinking of business, investment. And then the investment is to happen within our territory. And we may get something small. But they strategize to reduce how much they spend within the country. So that is a slogan that we can look at. And we say private wealth is inclusive of the multinational enterprises and then the businesses. And the business owners, the entrepreneurs who have the wealth that we need to tax effectively to safeguard our public education. We have resources or revenue within the country, but if we are able to reform our strategies and our policies, then we'll be able to adequately gain that revenue and use it to finance our education, and that is domestic revenue. There are a lot of avenues within the domestic arena that we can exploit to ensure that we get more money. One of it is that if companies that are registered or have linkages with tax havens are avoided, or we don't give them the opportunities, then it can also increase the local revenue or the domestic revenue that we mobilize. Because such companies always repatriate their revenue to these locations that are not taxable, that are not transparent, that are not accountable, and therefore it doesn't help the development of our nation. Multinational enterprises, including extractive companies, are granted tax incentives that are undue or unnecessary. In the past, they were using nationalization, they were using unstable, legal systems, they were using unstable business, environment and other things as excuses to project foreign direct investment and also to negotiate for incentives. So as in case of this insurgency, then their investment will also be secured. At least Ghana have enjoyed democracy over 20 years now, and successive governments have come and go from different political divides and other things. And at least as of now, we as a country should be able to have this as bargaining power to renegotiate and to negotiate. Bernard mentioned about the two contractors, the Anglo-Gold Ashanti and then the Newmont contract that were renegotiated, led by Professor Katoya. And how much we save on just two, development projects. So if we're able to do that for all the mining and the extractive sector investments that are in country, how much are we potentially going to save for the country? The Anglo-Gold example is what I cited here, that for one project, which is the Obuasi Mine Redevelopment Project, beyond all the development contract that they secured, for tax alone, they were able to secure $38 million plus over the project life of 25 years. So at the end of the day, the project will run all right, but potentially the only direct revenue we may get from that project will be the royalties. That is the only direct, because for tax, we have given it out already. And if you consider that $8 million, for instance, how much of educational finance and educational investment that this amount can support, either at the basic level or the secondary or the tertiary level. So these are critical issues for concern. Ghana is one of the mineral-rich countries. How are we ensuring that the rent that we generate from the extractive sector can fund public investment adequately, and then also help us to achieve the sustainable development goals? If you look at the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, for instance, it gives some priority areas every now and then that government should focus the money that is coming from the sector on. And education has been one of such. But is it enough? That is one aspect. In mining, do we have similar policies and regulations to also focus on the development of our country where we prioritize? If you look at the companies at the moment, and one example that I've cited, they have their own programs, which they usually, term it as corporate social responsibilities. And these corporate social responsibilities are most of the time not even linked to our medium-term development plans at the MMDA level, the Metropolitan Municipal and District Assembly level plans that they have. The companies that are situated in these MMDAs do not necessarily inform the MMDAs of their own corporate social responsibility. They say, this is our social responsibility. This is what we want to do to help the community that we live in. But the interesting part of it is that at the end of the day, the cost of investment into these corporate social responsibilities are tax exempt. That means that if they spend, say, $100 million in a year on projects that they have selected to help, in the past, most of the projects were more providing services and support to the Black Stars and those other, gaming and other sectors. Education, for instance, is not prioritized in these investments that they do. They do some health and other infrastructure as well. But whatever they tell us is what we have in our books. Bernard, the presenting, indicated that it is a report from the companies that we as a country build on and use. If you go to Anglo-Gold Ashanti, Newmont, if you go to the petroleum sector, one GRA official is allocated to a company or posted to a company, like Anglo-Gold Ashanti in Obuasi, And we have one GRE official who is responsible because of the volume of transactions that they deal with. But let's be frank to ourselves. Can one person be able to supervise the production of Anglo? So at the end of the day, it is Anglo, for instance, that has housed that public official and feeds that public official daily and supports the public official where the dependent of the public official uses the facilities of the company at discount or free and other things. And this individual cannot be at the production end at all the time. Even if it is in the gold room operations do not stop 24-hour continuous. Can the human being, one, be there 24 hours? He will have to rest. But then for the mine, workers, they run shift. So as some are tired, some go to sleep, and another team comes to continue. But we as a country, we have also not aligned to this kind of development trends to ensure that we are achieving retaining as much as we need to have. So these social responsibilities, for instance, are also sometimes misused because it is an opportunity rather for the enterprises, the multinationals, and not the country. And these are points that I think we can reflect through and see how we will rework around them and then gather our voices to support our government to renegotiate and have the best revenue that is supposed to. So that our educational sector and other primary sectors can be well managed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother Luis. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. The situation is very bad, and we need to do something about it, and that's why we are here. So I'm sure our media will help us trumpet this to bring to the stakeholders and government's attention as to how much we are losing in terms of these incentives. I think I don't want to take much time, otherwise I will summarize everything that Luis just said. And it's just to consolidate and to buttress what the previous speakers presented to us. And so we'll give you the opportunity now to ask questions. And here I'll ask my sister Margaret to take over from me to moderate this session. Please let's leave it to her. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your questions, comments, and observations.
Yes, so thank you very much. I would like to, first of all, as a way to commend Action Aid and then the Tax Justice Coalition and all other organizations that put this fantastic research together. We thank you so much. If I look at the figures as an educationist coming from maths, it's quite scary. Time over time, we have realized that a lot can be done in the public education sector. Yet, on the side of government, there is an outcry that we are not generating enough revenue from the taxes that we are collecting. Occasionally, there is this top tax that will be trumpeted, another time is withdrawn. So there is a tacit way by government in trying to sometimes communicate to the Ghanaian public that they are helping us to reduce our tax burden. But on the flip side of it, there are other tax leakages. Like we are witnessing the larger chunk of the tax waiver which is coming from parliamentary waiver. It is very serious. And I think that I will urge the coalition and Action Aid and all partners to continuously engage the Parliamentary Select Committee on Education as well as the judiciary. There is this kind of dichotomy. The judiciary sometimes say that we present our budget to Parliament for approval, And therefore, when people file suit against government to ensure provision of textbooks, materials, provision of school items, all furniture, and all the likes of the inputs that will go into quality teaching and education, there is that slow justice from the judiciary, because there is also the fear that once we rule against government, then our budget will not be approved. But one of the critical questions I'd like to ask, I have also gone to the ministry just trying to request for information on how much of the education sector budget is spent on textbooks, furniture, and the likes of it. But they will tell me, oh, everything goes into personnel and monument. Let us see. And I could not get that information. And it's unfortunate that it's only our developing partners that are able to be given this type of information, and they can openly do a publication for us to pick on. But I want to find out from the researchers, is there any kind of tracker when these funds are released to the sector ministries? Are we able to track where those funds actually go to? And then last but not the least, there was a question about, there was a comment on the extractive industry trying to also have a lot of tax waiver. Almost, if I decide properly, almost 250 million. Is that over the span of the 25 years cycle of, let's say, the life of AngloGold, or is just over a period? Thank you very much.
So mine is not a question, essentially it's a comment. So my mom is a teacher, and then in a community where she teaches, apparently when school reopens, the children do not come to school. So she has to go together with a colleague teacher into the communities and then call the students to come to the classroom. Now when they get there, as young as 3, 4, 5 years, working all around, and they go with the proposal that everything is free. You just have to enroll and then be in the classroom. And their parents are like, no, they go to school, they're all in schools. And the children will be like, no, we don't go to school. Then in their language, so that kind of a thing, and the children cannot speak. And you realize that when they break, they don't come to class. So they're always home. So I think one thing that deters these children has to do with resources, or say activities that goes on in the classroom. So if the tax incentives are well collated and government is able to generate enough revenue, then I think we can improve the education in these schools, because when they go and there is nothing there, so we compare it to the private school, that a KG child goes to school and he or she has access to videos to watch and all others, but then you go to the public school and you don't even have lights in their classroom to get access to these things. Then let me just put this question, if it holds, that if all these things are provided, if we are able to raise tax incentives and we are able to get all the resources in the classrooms, can we get these children willingly in the classrooms?
Thank you. Any other? Thank you for your comment that the fact that we are not investing much in public schools also implies that we are helping to widen inequality in the system, because they don't have equal resources to learn and all that. Any other comment? Okay, then as we think about questions or comments, I think we'll give the platform to Bernard to respond, and after that, Louise. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that question concerning whether there is a tracker. I think the issue of tracking is a very huge problem, and that may also be one of the reasons why
perhaps the little funding for the education sector does not get to where it has to get to. Because you can track, first of all, from the beneficiary who finally gets the final resource that has been located from the ministerial level, or you can also track from the spender or the ministry or the department level where they are allocating the money. But most of the time we depend on where the money is coming from. So you go to GES or this and they say, oh, we allocated this amount of money and record that. But now to go to the schools or the beneficiary or the children to ask them how many textbooks were you able to use this term? Do you, in terms of the chairs that you are sitting, when was the last time you had a good chair to sit on? All the other necessary things that make the school environment conducive for the child to learn, we are not able to adequately follow up on that. And that is one of the big problems. When we tried doing that around the Ghana South area in terms of tracking capitation grants, it was a huge problem. We wanted to get the parents or the teachers, the head teachers to get involved in following up what government allocates each year and whether it reaches them and whether it's sufficient. So again, the record keeping at that level is almost non-existent. When you want to teach them how to do it, it's quite very heavy for them. They are not able to do it properly. And what you realize is that most of the time the allocations do not, even if they come, they don't come on time. They are delayed over quarters. So that maybe you are in the first or the third quarter and you are still on the first quarter and you haven't received 2 quarters. So it means that you really lose track of what you are supposed to have and you don't have. So in terms of textbooks, other educational material and everything, they are lost in that process. We are not able to adequately track at that level, and also because we don't keep records. And the tracking should be done also by we civil society and parents themselves or the schools. But it looks like we are not currently in that mode to be able to track adequately, to be able to inform government. So we only track from who is spending and says that yes, okay, I'll spend this amount. But it doesn't really mean that the children have got it. And like she said, on the ground, when we listen to a politician, it looks rosy and nice. But on the ground, as she explained, you go there and realize most of the children are actually not in school, they don't go to class, they are roaming about. And why? Government will say, yes, we spend this amount of money. But is that amount of money making the children go to school? And she asked the question whether if all these resources are put in place, are the children now going to be willing to go to school? Yes, we have all been children before. We have been to school and we know how the school environment operates. When you go to the school and there are basic things that you don't have, you don't feel comfortable. If other children have it and you don't have, you really don't feel comfortable to be there. The next morning, you want to be somewhere fishing or farming or so where you can get something into your pocket. So the school environment generally is not made conducive. That's what happens to the children. You go to school and you don't have a chair to sit on, and you're always going to fight with other children, either you are sitting on the floor or whatever. Or you go to school, you don't have exercise books. Other children, their parents may be able to buy the exercise books, and you alone all the time, the teacher is calling your name. Where is your case? Where? You feel very uncomfortable. So you don't even want to be in that environment. So this is why we want government to fill in that space to make children want to be in school. For instance, that was one of the reasons why the school feeding program came about. Because some of the children, frankly, they go to school and they don't have enough to eat, they feel hungry, and it's very uncomfortable. But when the school feeding program came, we knew that it actually helped a lot of children to be in school, but you didn't have to think about feeding and other things. So we are looking at things that can make the children don't feel like they are left out. Because they do, what do you call it, tease each other. And you look at what happens to the next year and you too, and you feel like you're not out there and you just want to, you don't want to be in that company. So let government be able to make all children comfortable so they forget about their poverty. I was listening to a story about a UK MP, George Galloway, who was talking about the fact that in some time back, when they went to school, they were giving them school feeding. And there were children whose parents could pay for school feeding. Others, government supported it. By the time they are going for the feeding, those who are supported by government, they use a different color, maybe yellow. And those whose parents can, afford, they use maybe red. It was an idea by the government to want to make parents to want, because the children feel very uncomfortable using the yellow card, thinking that, oh, for you it is government that is supporting your feeding. For me, it's my parent. So even though they will not say it, they feel very uncomfortable until they revolted from time back and they changed the whole color. It doesn't matter whether it's government that is feeding you or your parent that is feeding you. So those instances are there. So we want government to make the playing field level in terms of providing the right social environment where children do not feel left out or do not feel uncomfortable and be ready to attend school. Thank you very much.
So we now have Louis.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is good that we are having these discussions, and I pray that we sustain it, and we as society and media will spearhead it from here, because if you look at the tax incentive leakages and waivers that our brother, for instance, highlighted, there are so many of them, and then it comes as an point who is leading the discussion. And I remember some few years ago there was this capital gains tax which helped the country to rope in quite a lot of money within that short period. I think it lived for just about 2 years and it was withdrawn. So currently it is still being considered, and other such tax policies. I think we need to sustain the tax systems that we have. Country at Ghana, we have been able to integrate our tax systems. And what is needed now is to strengthen the institutions like the GRA and others to be able to actually enforce them, evaluate them, and then also re-strategize the time. And we have to reduce these project or investment specific policies that we formulate. And that one is mostly influenced by the multinational enterprises who are bringing the money. And it looks like when we are kind of overwhelmed with the kind of investment that is coming in, then we are, in a hurry to give them some kind of incentives to ensure that the money comes to our shores and to boost our economy. But if we institutionalize these systems and processes, then they would also have to adopt what we have with whatever investment they are bringing in to help the economy. On the issue of the tracking and others, I think there has been some efforts initiated now. Society have initiated quite a number of social accountability interventions which have some potential to track. We have some tools that have been agreed that is being worked with, like the public expenditure tracking systems and others, which you can follow through to do it. But like Bernard indicated, the cost of even doing these kind of processes are quite huge, and government is not ready to finance some of these interventions. There's been also the advocacy to institutionalize social accountability within the local governance system, for instance, because if we plan and budget for infrastructure, capital development projects, like school buildings, like hospitals, and other structures, why can't we also budget or plan and budget for some amount to follow through the process to ensure that even the specifications and the deliverables that we indicated to have in the schools are there? If you look at the situation now, there are a number of public schools built new currently, which are not disability friendly, which are not having the needed gender facilities.
going further to these young girls and then women that are using these facilities. We build toilets, for instance, and then the standard is the same for boys and then girls. But we know that in the utilization of these facilities, the needs of girls outweigh that of boys. And therefore, some additional infrastructure could have been helpful to ensure that the girl child gets appropriate service even within the school. A lot of other things, sanitary situations and others are there. But it is also because our policies have not been that clear. If you interrogate with the MMDs, they say that their designs, for instance, come from above. So there is kind of a standardized, agreed design for putting up school structures. And the design didn't include the sanitary component or the water and sanitation component. So in their execution of the contract, they also couldn't bear that cost. So unless they get additional funds from possibly other projects before they will be able to add those facilities. And sometimes after commissioning that project, that additional infrastructure never comes. And these are difficulties. Even following the PEC and other social accountability processes, allocated funds are mostly not the same as the funds released. And then mostly not the same funds that are received. And even utilization also has its own challenges. So you might track it, but the next level for us is that more that we have even been able to track, we raise the advocacy issues and demand for accountability on them, so that the public officials will also be aware that citizens are awake now, and then they are also monitoring alongside and demanding for the right thing to be done. The 88 tax concession, as I cited as an example, is for the project life. The project life is 25 years. And within that 25 years, they have over $38 million as corporate income tax relief that they have there. I think we need to continuously increase domestic revenue, and that can help improve the quality of education that we offer in our country. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time it is time to launch the report. And I will call on Madam Chair, Mrs. Joyce Lanyon of the International Child Development Program, Ghana, which is affiliated to the International Child Development Program UK, and the Country Director of Action Aid, Mr. Sumaila Abdul Rahman, to jointly launch the report on the tax incentives and education financing in Ghana. Though we are talking about education, we also know that we are talking about the provision of public services. So we need the resources to finance the water, health, the social protection, security, and everything in this country. So when we talk of tax and resource mobilization, it is more than education, but today we are focusing on basic education. So I'm just going to hand over the mic.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Very, very grateful for this insightful knowledge that we have been given. And before I invite my colleague, the Country Director for Action Aid, I want to make a few reflections to say that, in fact, government has been too charitable in giving out very important resources that will support our primary education system. If you look at what COVID has brought onto us and what government is doing to actually enhance education in Ghana, it's a huge challenge. Issues around girls and their participation in school, these changing rooms, facilities that are built without looking at the policies that have been put in place, disability-friendly walkways, and the changing rooms for our girls, and even the teaching and learning process where all our colleagues with learning challenges, assessing learning in an acceptable format, and all those things is huge. Partly due to the fact that we are being too charitable. So if we really want to achieve the SDG goals, we need to carry this message and then make the noise and make sure we are part of these processes that gives light, unveils the curtain, so that we are aware. Some sometimes when they mention these big monies, we can't even comprehend it. My friend asked me, but you, Ghana, you're always mentioning millions. How is the million? Can you carry it in your head, on your head, and all that? So, colleagues, this is, for me, it's a very serious learning curve that I've applied today, and it will actually enhance what we have been doing to do the advocacy that we need to bring attention to government for some of these charitable monies they are giving out without due cognizance of its impact on our primary education. We really appreciate Action Aid, and we thank you for being part of this. We will not end it here. We will carry it along and do the necessary advocacy on it, and maybe learn more from our consultants how to break some of these figures down to understand how it is affecting our education system. We thank you so much. On this note, I'd like to invite Mr. Rahman, Smaila Abdul-Rahman, to help with the lunch. Colleagues, and on behalf of Action Aid, we launched the report on tax incentives, what tax incentives can do for basic education in Ghana 2020. So we duly launched this document to help us do the next steps of the advocacy to support the primary education in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being part of the process to this end. I'm sure that the process was quite interesting, and you were also excited about some of the issues that were being raised here. One of the things I want to say, Ghana, if we really need business and we want to finance our public services from our own resources, we should be able to do that. Because if you look at the incentives package, the tax exemptions, the tax treaties that have been outlined in the kind of monies that we are letting go, it means that we can think a lot more. And these are just monies that we are privy to. Because you all know that in this country, it's very challenging to get data on some of these things. So this is the data probably that we have. And you can imagine that if we had a comprehensive picture of the tax incentives that we give out, it will surprise you to know that we don't need to go and negotiate for any money from anywhere to be able to finance our public services. You know, and they can take this and start mobilizing around and making sure that things happen. So I would just like to end on that one and then conclude by saying that, look, Ghana, until we move away from being governed by manifestos to looking at national development policies, we will continue to have these challenges. So that's food for thought for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, CD. I think he deserves another round of applause. Thank you. On behalf of Action Aid Ghana, I would like to first appreciate our chairperson, Mrs. Joyce Lanyon, for agreeing to take on this role today. Secondly, thank all the presenters, Maria, Bernard, and Louise, for a good work done. Not forgetting the invited guests from CSO, unions, that is NAT, think tanks like Ghana Africa Education Watch, CSOs like the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition, NGOs like Action Aid, national level NGOs. We thank them very much. And finally, our media colleagues and partners who we know and believe will carry the information to the public domain. Thank you for coming. My name is Margaret Brewald. I'm the Women's Rights and Campaigns Manager for ActionAid Ghana. Today, ActionAid launched a report titled Tax Incentives and Opportunities in Financing Basic Education in Ghana. This report highlighted the fact that Ghana loses so much money in granting tax incentives to multinational companies.
This forum has actually brought to light issues around tax incentives and its impact on basic education. And from what we are seeing, we could understand that the incentives are actually not helping us achieve our SDGs.
Ghana gave away $900 million as tax incentives, and we think this is so much that can do a lot for the basic education sector in terms of textbooks for children, in terms of school feeding, in terms of hiring more teachers, in terms of providing school furniture. So there's so much that $900 million can do.
I would like to extend this discussion to the provision of public services in Ghana. If we look at our tax incentives very well, we'll be able to raise the necessary resources to not only finance basic education, but also provide potable water for the citizenry, to take care of the health cost needs of the citizenry, even to provide basic security services and create access to justice for the citizenry.
Parliament of Ghana, for instance, granting a number of tax concessions to mining companies in Ghana. That money, if we were able to stem it, we would have been able to use it to invest in the education sector to maximize the service delivery in the sector.
We know there are girls who do not go to school when they menstruate and whose families or parents cannot even afford the sanitary towels. Should the state take away the tax on the sanitary towels, it will bring the cost down and will be able to become affordable.
We as an organization, Activista Ghana, plead with the government and urge them to take the urgency of having a Ghana where basic education is prioritized, and by doing so, actions need to be shown where there is less tax incentives granted to these foreign national companies, such that we are building our country at the same time also attracting investors.
I will also call on the government or the state to do a research to find out how much tax incentives we have given and whether we've been able to achieve the aims and objectives set for it. How many employments have these companies been able to create to merit the tax incentives we've given over the period? Thank you.